Hi, I'm Mad Uncle Morgan, and today we're talking about putting runes on pottery. The other day in a Facebook group, someone asked if my wife could put sigils and names on a chalice. And my answer was no. The reason is that this pattern here is a scrolling wheel, and this is a stamp, and for every sigil we would have to make a separate stamp to impress them into the clay. She does not do carvings. And as for the Hebrew letters, we do not have a stamp set for them. But that has never stopped me from being able to use a piece of pottery and being able to put sigils and Hebrew names or other magical symbols on it. Here I have a garbage piece of pottery. This is a rejected piece that went into the garbage. I found a bad cork for it. And what I'm going to be doing is turning this into a spell jar. Now, I'm a writer, and I live off of royalties. People buy ebooks, and a certain amount of the money they pay of the ebooks I write comes to me, and I have to survive on that. Today's project is to create a royalty increase spell jar. Now, there's a possibility that, depending on the piece of pottery you get, okay, some pieces of pottery are cheap enough where you could actually take a sharp tool and kind of chisel the symbols in. But this will wreck a piece of pottery. I prefer using fingernail polish. This particular one is Red Hot Red Cream. It's a Maybelline product. This is something I've learned while doing rune stuff. So, first thing I'm going to be doing is putting... make sure you don't drip. I don't know how well each piece of pottery is different. Some of them can survive fingernail polish, others can't. If all possible, avoid fingernail polish. So what I'm doing here on this side is I am basically carefully drawing on letters associated with my writing business. Please note that this requires a certain amount of patience. One thing I've learned is that you can actually charge the fingernail polish in the little jar so that you can have this pre-charged for the letters. And I use red for runes because runes are associated with blood by a lot of practitioners. And when you're actually carving runes in with a knife into like wood, there's a good chance you're going to cut yourself and bleed all over the piece anyway. Um, and this does require a certain amount of patience. Um, but on the bright note, it does not have to look perfect. Now the reason I stumbled across this technique is actually because of the fact that when I was a kid, my mom had this elephant bank that she had. It was one of those banks that was given out and sold during the Eisenhower presidential campaign, and it basically said, "I like Ike," and my father's name was Mike, so she had put a red M in front of Ike, so it said, "I like Mike," on this bank. And years later, when I started doing rune work, it occurred to me that this was something that I could do with the runes. I use a lot of fingernail polish. I use fingernail polish, for instance, to mark keys, so I can tell them from other keys. So fingernail polish also sticks to metal, which is a handy thing to know. So in this case, what I'm doing is on one side I'm putting very sloppily. My work is not the world's neatest work. I'm putting initials of pen names and business entities associated with my writing on this side. One thing with fingernail polish is you gotta wait in between, because, as I said, I'm not sure how well this would survive fingernail polish remover. I honestly think this would survive based on the glaze, but there are pieces of pottery that I've seen from bargain stores that will not survive. You know, it'll just eat holes in the pottery, the glaze. Which, if you don't care, then it's not a problem. Unfortunately, this item's going to sit on my shelf for years after I get done finishing it. Now, one thing to remember about writing, and the way income comes into writers, is that we don't get paid up front for the most part for what we do. Our income comes after the fact, you know, and it's a trickle, you know. We don't get the whole amount all at once. So, you know, we can write a piece and have it in print for 20 years and slowly trickle out the income over a 20-year period. Writing is not It's not a profession I would have chosen if I would have known the reality of the economics. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that I have stories in my head, so they come out, and writing stuff is a way to keep the voices down, so to speak. Because I'll sit there and go, oh, what would happen if trolls were driving taxis in New York City? Don't laugh. The actual story I'm working on. And in many ways, I kind of view my writing separate from myself. Because occasionally I don't know where the ideas came from or why I had them, and it's interesting. And also, another reason I view my writing separate from myself is it generates royalties and sales, and it's not dependent on my mood. Which is a good thing because, I had the health scare a couple years ago where I kind of lost the entire year to a health scare. Um, I was being treated for bipolar, and they didn't quite get the meds right. And then when they put the beta blocker into the mix, I became extremely depressed. And I was having a hard time working before that point, but it got worse with the beta blockers, and I kind of became suicidal. But no, I lost over a year to them trying to fix my meds. And during that time, I didn't do any new writing. I even quit writing for the newsletter, and it was just one of those situations where it was a good thing my writing, once it's completed, is actually separate from myself. My business is not like my wife's business where, her income is directly dependent on how many items that she makes. While my income is dependent on that, I don't have to. It's not a one-on-one thing. Basically, she makes one chalice, she can sell one chalice. I, on the other hand, I make one book. I write the original, and then X number of copies can be sold. I don't have to individually type out each and every one I sell. And this is important because quite often businesses that are wrapped up where the business is kind of an extension of the owner, they suffer when the owner suffers. But if the business is separated, that lessens the impact. Okay? And other people have came up and pointed this out. I've been reading The Witch's Coin by Christopher. I'm going to totally mutilate this last name. Penzick. Christopher Penzick. Of course, he's probably going to leave an angry message on my answering machine going, that's not how you pronounce my name. Anyway, he was talking about this, where businesses need to be separate entities from the owners. Let's see if this is dry. It's still a little tacky. And he was talking about how a business can be, separated from the owner and charged separately. It can be treated as a magical entity. And that's what this is about, is to treat the writing business as a separate entity. So on one side, I have initials associated with pen names and business entities that I do writing through. Now, one of the things that you can do with a royalty jar is to write the names of the stuff you've written down on little pieces of paper the size of fortune cookie papers, and you can stick them into the jar along with, small coins, and I think I can get a dime in there. I'll probably use a mercury head dime that I have, and small stones, and then you can charge this whole jar. So while you're doing let's say you were charging using middle pillar, you could actually hold this jar at the same time you're doing the middle pillar ritual to help charge it. Now, on the opposite side of this, I'm going to be putting a bind rune on. And the idea is to basically have a magical symbol that sums up the concept of royalties, okay? And so with the runes, I was thinking there's the F rune, Felu, which stands for money. And there's the rune for property, the O rune. And of course, this is stories, so we also need the A rune, which stands for speech. So I'm taking these three runes and I'm combining them into a bind rune. And this technique I'm using can be used for sigils. Chaos Mage is... No, Chaos Magic is a wonderful thing. And so I'm going to end up with a bind rune like that. And basically what it is that, and the reason the property rune is in here is the fact that books are property. And we have a legal term called intellectual property. So by writing a book, I own the copyright to that book. And I can basically, let's say I decide to go with a publisher, what I'm doing is actually leasing the copyright to them. Or I could do it directly and just sell directly to the customer. And they're basically paying to use or enjoy the information in the book. So basically, a copyright, a book is a property. Okay, it's like a rental property. There are some people who advise writers to think of royalties as an annuity. Basically a stock fund that pays you a set amount every year. Problem with that is the fact that it's not a standard rate. Your royalties go up and down. Um, and there's things that can affect your royalties, like producing a new work tends to up your royalties across the board. So it's like playing the stock market, and each book is a separate stock. And but it's a challenge of being a writer. But anyway, so I've got a small stone in here already, and I put in the title of one of my works. I put in the title for the small e-article I wrote on magical images of the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. And I've got my business names on this side. So on this other side, I'm doing my buying room and trying not to drip fingernail polish all over the place. And something I've learned is that sigils do not have to be perfect, which is very nice. Binding runes don't have to be perfect either, and that's a very good thing because it's really hard to get things perfect. And so I put the property rune first. I have a tendency to put runes on in a particular order that makes sense in my mind. And then I'm putting the rune for speech there. And finally I'm putting in the and please note that these two runes, it wouldn't matter which direction I did them in, because the concept of copyright is kind of it's a two rune concept. And then finally I'm putting Fehu in, the rune for money, which originally was meant cattle, but Fehu is where we come with the English term fee, where that actually comes from. So and there you go. So basically, this jar is a symbol in itself, and it represents my writing and the potential for my writing to make money separate from myself. And I can charge this as a separate entity, and I can, put in additional titles in here and charge this whole thing. And it's not pretty, but this is how I put sigils and bind runes. And my Hebrew lettering is horrible. It's an ugly thing when I do it like this, but this is how I do it, so I don't have to basically, be in danger of ruining, a nice piece. And it's it's an interesting and useful technique to know that you can put on runes and sigils and write lettering onto pottery and other items using fingernail polish. So that's what I've done today. So have a good day.